Let me start by asking you a question, the one that's been burning in my mind every single day for the past year. Was my daughter wrong to do what she did? When I walked into that guest bedroom, the one we'd set up just for my sister, Clara, who was visiting for the holidays, and saw my husband, Thomas, tangled up with her, the air didn't just feel thick, it felt like it was instantly sucked out of the universe. It was a scene ripped straight from the cheapest, most twisted soap opera, except the setting was my own damn home, and the devastation was mine. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, paralyzed, watching two people I loved more than anything in the world destroy my life in a single, silent moment. But that moment of total, soul-crushing despair wasn't the end of the story. It was just the prologue. The true, agonizing climax came 2 days later, and it was delivered not by me, the betrayed wife, but by my 17-year-old daughter, Eliza. What she did next was so cold, so surgically precise in its vengeance, that it left Thomas and Clara completely ruined, yet it somehow filled me with a twisted sense of justice. Tell me honestly, after everything, if you would have done the same thing, or if you think a daughter should ever have to deliver that kind of punishment to her own father. The story, the real, slow-burn tragedy of it, started years before that horrific afternoon. Thomas and I had been married for 20 years. 20 years of building a life, a home, a business, and most importantly, raising Eliza. He was the classic devoted husband and father, a successful architect, a handy guy around the house, the one who taught Eliza how to change a tire and helped her build the most ridiculously complex school projects. Our life wasn't perfect, no marriage is, but it was solid. We had our rhythm. We had comfort. I genuinely thought we had forever. My sister, Clara, is 7 years younger than me. She was always the wild one, the artist, the free spirit who floated through life on a cloud of charisma and chaos. She's beautiful, in that effortless, bohemian way, the exact opposite of my more structured, practical nature. Over the years, she'd bounced between cities, jobs, and relationships, but she always treated our home as her safe harbor. Thomas and Clara were always friendly, the way an in-law should be. They'd joke around, talk about music. They both loved classic rock, and he was often the one she'd call for advice on things like apartment leases or car trouble. There was never a moment, not a single one, that raised a red flag for me. It was just the easy familiarity of family. Eliza, our daughter, was the center of our universe. She's smart, fiercely independent, and has a level of emotional intelligence that both impressed and terrified me. She was about to start her senior year of high school, looking at colleges, and the stress of applications meant our house was already vibrating with a subtle tension. That's why I was so happy when Clara announced she was coming to stay with us for 3 weeks. She was escaping a messy breakup, and I thought the casual, carefree energy she brought would be a welcome distraction. Clara arrived on a Monday, bringing with her a suitcase full of art supplies and a whirlwind of stories. Everything was normal for the first week. We had dinners together, watched movies, and Clara even helped Eliza brainstorm ideas for her college application essay. The dynamic was the familiar, comfortable trio plus one. But then, subtly, things began to shift. It started with small things. Thomas and Clara suddenly spending more time in the garage, supposedly working on restoring an old cabinet. They'd disappear for hours, and when they came back, their conversation would have this hushed, inside joke quality. I chalked it up to their shared interest in carpentry and classic rock. They really did bond over the weirdest things. Then I noticed the glances. Fleeting, charged little looks across the dinner table. If I asked Thomas a question, his eyes would sometimes drift momentarily to Clara before answering me. It was almost imperceptible, but it chipped away at my peace of mind. I started feeling like the third wheel in my own home, the wife who just didn't get the cool, new inside joke. The internal monologue began. Asterisk, stop being paranoid. It's your sister. It's your husband. Their family. This is how normal people interact. Asterisk, I fought the creeping suspicion with every ounce of my rationality. I hated myself for even thinking it. The second week, the lies started. Thomas used to leave the house every Tuesday and Thursday for a late-night meeting with clients. They were long-standing appointments, and I never questioned them. But one Thursday, I happened to glance at his briefcase as he was walking out, and it looked lighter than usual. His laptop bag was still sitting on the kitchen counter. I mentioned it casually, saying something like, "Didn't you need your laptop for that presentation?" He froze for just a second, a tiny hitch in his stride. He looked back and gave me a smile that was too wide, too quick. "Oh, right, almost forgot. Just grabbing it." He came back, grabbed the bag, and left. The next day, I called his office's main number, just to check on a minor detail about a bill. His secretary, a sweet, older woman named Marilyn, mentioned offhand that Thomas had actually been working from home most of the week to focus on the big city hall bid, and hadn't been in the office for any evening meetings at all. A small, cold knot formed in my stomach. The meeting wasn't a meeting. He was going somewhere. My mind immediately went to the worst-case scenario, the cliché, a secret girlfriend, a second life. My sister, Clara, wasn't even in the running yet. I was too busy protecting my husband from my own wicked thoughts. The night before the discovery, I barely slept. I lay awake next to Thomas, listening to the steady, infuriating rhythm of his breathing, while my own heart hammered out a chaotic, anxious beat. I thought about confronting him, laying out the evidence, the light briefcase, the secretary's comment, the shared glances. But what if I was wrong? What if I was just a tired, insecure wife overreacting? I couldn't bear the thought of damaging our marriage with a baseless accusation. I decided to wait, to gather irrefutable proof, and that decision, that need for absolute, undeniable certainty, is what led me to the guest room the next afternoon. It was Saturday. Thomas had said he was going to the hardware store for some obscure part for the cabinet he was fixing with Clara. Clara, meanwhile, was supposedly taking a nap because she'd been up late sketching. Eliza was at a college prep study session, which was a small mercy. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I was folding laundry in the master bedroom, the smell of clean sheets a pathetic counterpoint to the storm brewing inside me. I heard a soft sound from the hallway, a muffled thump, and then a giggle. It was Clara's giggle. I stopped folding and held my breath. The sound had come from the hardware store trip should have taken Thomas at least an hour. My heart didn't just sink, it plummeted, taking my stomach with it. I dropped the laundry basket. I didn't think, I moved. I walked down the hall, my feet silent on the thick carpet. As I approached the guest room door, the sounds became clearer, the soft, unmistakable creak of the old wooden bed frame, followed by a sigh that definitely didn't belong to a woman taking a nap. I reached for the doorknob. My hand was shaking so violently that it took me 3 attempts to finally grip it. I turned the knob slowly, praying against all reason that it would be something innocent, a sick cat, a dropped book, anything. I pushed the door open, and that's when the world shattered. They were there just as I described. Thomas, my husband, the father of my child, and Clara, my sister, my blood, the girl I had protected and loved since she was a baby. They didn't even notice me for a full, horrifying second. They were so engrossed. The shock was so profound that I couldn't make a sound. Thomas looked up first, his eyes going wide with pure, undiluted terror. Clara followed his gaze, and her face went instantly white, the color draining away as if pulled by an invisible plug. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I have ever heard. It stretched for what felt like an eternity, filled only by the ragged sound of my own breathing. I looked from Thomas's face, etched with guilt and shame, to Clara's, which was a mask of cold, devastating confirmation. I didn't need an explanation. The image burned itself into my memory, every sickening detail. I finally managed one word, a hoarse whisper that barely made it past my lips. "Why?" Thomas scrambled, pulling the sheets up, stammering an incoherent string of apologies and excuses. Clara just buried her face in her hands. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned around and walked out. I walked into the master bathroom, locked the door, and sank onto the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. The tears didn't come immediately. First came the nausea, the dry heaving that racked my body, emptying the last vestiges of strength I had. When the tears finally did come, They were silent, scalding, and unstoppable. I cried not for the loss of my marriage, but for the grotesque betrayal, the absolute destruction of my trust in the two people who were supposed to be my family, my safe haven. I stayed in that bathroom for 2 hours. When I finally emerged, the house was silent again. I walked into the guest room. It was empty, the sheets messily pulled up, the scent of their betrayal still heavy in the air. I found Thomas in the living room, sitting on the sofa, head in his hands. He looked old, defeated, and utterly pathetic. Clara was gone. A note was on the kitchen counter, written on a napkin in her messy handwriting. It said simply, "I am so sorry. I left." Thomas tried to talk, to plead, to explain that it was a mistake, an aberration, that he loved me. The words were meaningless static. I cut him off with a single, icy stare. "Don't. Just don't. You have exactly until Eliza gets home tonight to pack a bag and get out of this house.
Do not speak to me.
Do not call me. If you are here when she walks through that door, I will call the police and tell them you are trespassing." The authority in my voice surprised even me. It was the voice of a woman who had nothing left to lose. He knew I meant it. He nodded slowly, his eyes wide, and without another word, he started to move. He packed a single duffel bag in the bedroom we once shared. I stood on the landing, watching him. Before he left, he stopped at the front door and tried one last time. "Please, honey, let me explain to Eliza. I want to tell her myself." I looked him straight in the eye, my voice a deadly calm whisper. "You don't get to hurt her too. You forfeited that right the second you touched my sister. I will tell her. Now go." He walked out the door, and out of my life, the sound of the latch clicking a final, definitive period on 20 years. The hardest part, the true terror, was facing Eliza. She came home around 6, full of the bright, nervous energy of a teenager focused on her future. She called out, "Mom, I'm home." How did the furniture run go? I met her in the kitchen. She stopped abruptly, sensing the shift in the air. "Mom? Where's Dad? And where's Clara?" I walked over to the kitchen table, sat down, and simply said, "Eliza, sit down. We need to talk." I told her everything, leaving out no detail except the graphic ones. I told her how I walked into the room, what I saw, and how I had told Thomas to leave. I watched my brilliant, fiercely emotional daughter process the information. Her face went through a terrifying kaleidoscope of emotions, confusion, disbelief, then a cold, white-hot rage that seemed to crystallize every feature. She didn't cry.
She didn't yell.
She just looked at me and asked, in a voice as steady as granite, "Is that why he wasn't at the office for those meetings? Was he with her then, too?" I told her I didn't know, but it was likely. She nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. Then she stood up and walked straight to her room. I heard the lock click. I sat there, heartbroken, but also strangely relieved. The worst part of that day was over, or so I thought. The next day was Sunday, a day of agonizing, suffocating quiet. Eliza didn't come out of her room until the late afternoon. When she did, she was completely composed. She didn't talk about Thomas or Clara. She simply announced she was going to the library to finish a research paper. I knew she was lying. She didn't need to go to the library for a research paper. But I didn't question her. I figured she needed space, a lie to protect herself, and I gave it to her. She left the house and was gone for about 4 hours. When she came back, she was still calm, but there was a strange, almost electric tension radiating from her. She went straight back to her room. I spent the evening calling lawyers, starting the brutal, soul-crushing process of divorce. It was a blur of legal jargon and financial calculations, a cruel administrative overlay to the emotional wreckage. Then came Monday. Thomas called my cell phone. I didn't answer, but he left a voicemail. His voice was shaky, bordering on hysterical. "Honey, you have to talk to me. I don't know what's happening. I just went to the bank, and my accounts are locked. My credit cards are frozen. I can't access anything. Even the joint account is completely drained. What did you do?" His panic was palpable. I hung up the phone. I hadn't touched the joint account yet. The divorce lawyer had advised me to wait. I was confused and, frankly, a little impressed. Who had done this? I walked straight to Eliza's room and knocked. "Eliza, we need to talk."
Now.
She opened the door, her expression blank. I held up the phone. "Your father just called. His accounts are frozen, his cards are maxed out, and the joint account is empty." "I didn't do it. Did you?" She didn't flinch. She simply walked over to her desk and pulled out a stack of neatly printed papers, bank statements, credit card statements, and a notarized document. She looked at me, her eyes dead serious. "I did it, Mom." She explained it all with the cold, clinical precision of a financial analyst. A year prior, on her 16th birthday, my parents had gifted her a substantial, though not massive, trust fund that gave her limited access to funds for educational purposes, but full signatory rights to manage a small savings account they had set up for her college applications. Over the past 3 months, Thomas, in a bizarre attempt to teach her financial responsibility, had added her as a secondary signatory to his main checking account, supposedly so she could learn to pay utility bills and track expenses using the online portal. He never dreamed she would use that access against him. As for the credit cards, she had used her own college application fund to pay off the balances, then immediately maxed out his 3 main credit cards by purchasing 3 things: 2 very expensive, non-refundable, non-transferable first-class round-trip tickets, one to a remote island destination, the other to a completely different, equally remote one, and several $1,000s in untraceable prepaid gift cards, which she had already disposed of in a public trash can. The bank, seeing a sudden flurry of highly suspicious activity and maxed-out credit lines, had automatically flagged and frozen all associated accounts. She then pointed to the notarized document. "This is the resignation letter I drafted and had a notary public witness and sign. I used one of my father's old email addresses and sent it to his main client, the one he's been chasing for 3 years. I also CC'd their entire board of directors, detailing the unforeseen and severe personal issues that necessitated his immediate and permanent resignation from the City Hall bid, effective immediately, citing a complete lack of professional integrity and moral character. I used specific details about his infidelity to make the email sound plausible. She had meticulously dismantled his financial life and professionally torpedoed his career in a single afternoon. The cold, hard logic of it, the sheer scale of the revenge, was terrifying. She had sacrificed her own college fund money, committed what was probably several layers of financial fraud, and used his deepest secret as a weapon. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I was staring at my daughter, this ruthless, brilliant young woman who had just delivered the most devastating, satisfying, and potentially illegal act of revenge imaginable, all in my name. I was her mother, and I was supposed to be the moral compass. But a huge, dark part of me was screaming with vindication. I saw the look in her eyes. She was hurting, terrified of the consequences, but utterly unapologetic for protecting her mother and her own future. Before I tell you what happened next, what I told her, and what the ultimate consequence of this scorched earth strategy was, ***, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. ***, would you have protected her from the legal fallout? Would you have been horrified and demanded she reverse everything? Or would you have hugged her and said, "Thank you. Now let's make sure you don't go to jail"? Tell me honestly, because I needed that guidance right then, and I need to know now if my decision was the right one. I looked at the paperwork, at the sheer, bold audacity of her plan, and then I looked at my daughter. The only response I could manage was a single, long exhale. I walked over to her, not to scold, but to pull her into a tight, fierce hug. "Eliza," I whispered into her hair. That was the most insane, terrifying, and brilliant thing I have ever witnessed. "And you are grounded for life." She actually let out a small, weak laugh, the first genuine human sound I'd heard from her since Saturday. My first instinct, the one that overrode everything else, was not to punish her, but to protect her. I knew the moment Thomas figured out it was her. He would use every legal tool he had to retaliate, not just against me, but against her. The revenge was sweet, but the fallout could ruin her future. I immediately called my divorce lawyer and explained the situation, omitting Eliza's direct involvement and simply saying that Thomas's own reckless financial behavior had led to the account freeze. I also immediately reversed the funds she had moved from her college savings back into her account, effectively erasing the most legally traceable part of her revenge. The credit card purchases were harder to undo, but my lawyer was experienced. He advised me to maintain the stance that Thomas's erratic behavior after the initial confrontation was the cause of all the financial chaos. The immediate resignation letter she sent to his client was a bomb that couldn't be unsent, and it worked exactly as planned. Within 24 hours, Thomas was not only off the City Hall bid, but was essentially blacklisted from his former firm, who feared the public relations disaster of dealing with his sudden, scandalous moral failing. His career, the foundation of his self-worth, was over. The final confrontation with Thomas was not a shouting match. It was a cold, brutal negotiation. He tracked me down at my lawyer's office, frantic and begging. He knew I hadn't frozen his accounts. He knew I wasn't that financially savvy or that ruthless. In a moment of desperation, he suggested it was Clara, that she had done it out of spite and then fled. That's when I dropped the truth on him like a physical weight. It wasn't Clara, Thomas. It was Eliza, your own daughter. The air left his body. He went silent, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. She did this, I continued, my voice low and steady, because you didn't just hurt me. You destroyed her sense of a safe home. You didn't just cheat. You did it with her aunt in her home, 2 doors down from her bedroom. She protected herself, and me, because you failed to protect us both. And this is the cost of that failure. He sat there, utterly broken. The humiliation, the financial ruin, and the knowledge that his own daughter had engineered his downfall was too much for him to bear. In that moment, the power shifted entirely. He no longer had leverage, career, or dignity. He knew that if he fought, I would simply confirm Eliza's actions and turn his shame into a public spectacle that would follow him forever. He signed the divorce papers almost immediately, agreeing to an extremely favorable settlement for us, including giving up his claim to the house and most of his retirement savings, all to ensure that Eliza's name and her ruthless acts remained out of the official court record. The divorce was finalized quickly and quietly. As for Clara, she was gone, swallowed by her own chaos. She called me a few times, tearful and begging for forgiveness. I never picked up. My lawyer handled the calls, informing her that any attempt to contact me or Eliza would be considered harassment. The sisterhood, the lifelong bond, was severed as cleanly as a surgical cut. She reached out to Eliza once on social media, a vague, apologetic message, but Eliza simply blocked her without a word. The punishment was simple: exile. The aftermath has been a long, slow climb back to sanity. Eliza and I are closer than ever, but the cost of her revenge is visible in a subtle, hardened edge to her personality. She is still my brilliant, beautiful daughter, but the innocence is gone, replaced by a cynical wisdom that no teenager should possess. We had to move, selling the house that was the site of the betrayal and the revenge, and start fresh in a new town where no one knew our story. She excelled in her senior year and is now happily away at a top university, pursuing a degree in economics of all things. She says she wants to learn how to be too powerful to be ruined by a single lie. As for me, I am healing. The quiet life, built on trust and a renewed sense of self-respect, is slowly restoring me. I realize that my daughter didn't just punish her father. She taught me how to fight for myself when I was too paralyzed by grief to do it. The moral of this story isn't about revenge, although it certainly felt like it at the time. It's about the terrifying, raw, and sometimes ruthless way that children will protect the people they love and the stability they need. Eliza didn't act out of childish spite. She acted as the CEO of her own ruined future, correcting a financial and emotional imbalance created by two selfish adults. She punished her father, and in doing so, she saved her mother. I was the wife betrayed, but she was the daughter whose world collapsed.
Was she wrong?
Maybe legally, but morally, she was a warrior who cleared the wreckage so we could both walk away. Like this video if you were on Eliza's side. She deserves to know that her actions, extreme as they were a form of justice. Subscribe for more stories like this, stories that remind us the quietest people